It started during the mid-season break, the kind of lull that makes athletes restless. The locker room smelled of liniment and grass, the air thick with competition and unspoken pressure. I was 24 then, a midfielder with a reputation for reliability, both on the field and off it. My boyfriend, Liam, liked to joke that I treated relationships the same way I treated soccer, consistent, careful, and maybe a little too predictable. If someone had told me that loyalty could blur, that kindness could turn into something else entirely, I would have laughed. Back then, I thought I knew exactly who I was. The incident happened during a scrimmage. Ryan Moore, our star striker, the kind of player who made highlight reels look effortless, went down clutching his knee after a mistimed tackle. He was known for his confidence, sometimes mistaken for arrogance, but he was also the heartbeat of our offense. The silence that followed his fall was heavy, the kind that eats sound. The medical team rushed in, and within minutes, Ryan was on a stretcher, jaw tight, eyes glassy. I remember standing near the sideline, hands on my hips, feeling something uneasy stir inside me. Pity, maybe. Or recognition. A week later, Coach called me into his office. "Ethan," he said, leaning back in his chair, "Ryan's recovery's going to take a while. He's not handling it well. I want you to keep an eye on him, help him through rehab, make sure he doesn't skip sessions." "Why me?" I asked. "Because you're steady. And he listens to you, even if he pretends he doesn't." I nodded, though I wasn't sure that was true. Ryan and I had never been close. He lived fast, laughed loud, flirted shamelessly. I kept to routines, early nights, quiet meals with Liam over video calls. Still, I agreed. It seemed like the right thing to do. The first time I visited Ryan's apartment, he greeted me with that crooked grin that always looked half sincere. "Didn't think you'd actually show up, St. Ethan," he said, leaning on his crutches. "I said I would," I replied, setting down the grocery bag I'd brought. "You need to keep your strength up." He smirked. "You're worse than my physical therapist." We spent that afternoon going through stretches. He complained, joked, cursed under his breath when the pain got too sharp. But beneath the sarcasm, I saw flashes of something raw, fear, maybe, or frustration. The kind of vulnerability that didn't fit his public image. At first, I kept things strictly professional. I reminded him of his exercises, helped with meal prep, updated the coach. But Ryan had a way of getting under your skin without trying. He'd say things like, "How's perfect Liam doing?" with a teasing tone that was impossible to read. "Fine," I'd answer shortly, pretending not to notice the implication. Still, the questions lingered after I left. Was I really happy, or just comfortable? Weeks passed, and the visits became routine. Rehab sessions, short walks, shared coffee afterward. Ryan's walls started to lower, not dramatically, just in quiet admissions. He told me how terrified he was of losing his spot on the team, how people saw his confidence as arrogance when it was really defense. I listened, unsure why his honesty mattered so much. One evening, after a particularly rough session, he slumped on the couch, sweating and silent. The air between us felt charged, though I couldn't say why. "I hate this," he muttered. "Feeling useless. Watching everyone move on." "You're not useless," I said softly. "You just need time." He looked up then, eyes sharp and searching. "You really believe that?" I hesitated. "Yeah. I do." Something passed between us, something wordless but heavy. I looked away first, fumbling for my keys. "I should get going," I murmured. "Sure," he said, voice low. "Thanks for being here." The words shouldn't have meant anything, but they did. On the drive home, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and white, and my chest felt too tight. Liam called while I was stopped at a red light. His voice was warm, familiar, asking about my day, about Ryan's progress. I answered automatically, every word correct but hollow. After we hung up, I sat there for a long moment, staring at my reflection in the windshield. I told myself it was just exhaustion, just empathy. That I was doing my job, but as I drove off, I couldn't shake the image of Ryan's eyes, unguarded, grateful, lonely that I told myself it was nothing. Just sympathy, but sympathy doesn't keep you awake at night. Days blurred into a rhythm that felt dangerously familiar. Every morning, I told myself I was only helping Ryan get back on his feet. Every evening, I left his apartment with the same hollow reassurance, that I was still in control of my feelings. But something in that routine began to shift, quietly, like a fault line beneath calm ground. Ryan's recovery was slow but determined. He hated weakness, yet he never complained when I was there. "You make it easier to try," he said once, during a set of leg lifts, his voice strained with effort. It was a small comment, one I should have ignored. Instead, it lingered like warmth against skin. That we began to talk more, not about soccer or rehab, but about everything else. He told me how his father hadn't spoken to him in years, how the silence hurt more than any injury. I told him about the small town I grew up in, where ambition felt like a betrayal of contentment. He listened the way people do when they actually cared. That I started staying longer after sessions. Sometimes, he'd cook dinner, simple things, pasta or omelets, and we'd sit on his balcony overlooking the city. The skyline glimmered like a promise neither of us could name. I laughed more with Ryan than I had in months. It felt easy, natural. Too natural. Liam noticed the difference. During one of our calls, he said, "You sound lighter lately. It's good to hear you happy." "I guess I am," I replied before realizing what that implied. There was a pause on his end, the kind filled with questions he didn't ask. Then he said softly, "I miss you, Ethan." "I miss you too," I answered, and I meant it, but the words carried a strange guilt, as if borrowed from someone else's mouth. Over the following weeks, boundaries blurred in small ways. I'd sit too close while adjusting Ryan's brace. He'd hold my gaze a fraction longer than necessary. When he laughed, I caught myself watching his mouth instead of the smile. Each moment was harmless on its own. Together, they formed a quiet confession neither of us dared to voice. One evening, heavy rain trapped us inside his apartment. The session was over, but neither of us moved to end it. Ryan hobbled to the kitchen and opened a bottle of wine. "You drink?" he asked, teasing. "Not usually." "Then tonight's an exception." We ate on the floor, leaning against the couch, the sound of rain filling the silence between sentences. Ryan picked up a guitar resting by the wall, something I hadn't noticed before, and strummed a few uneven chords. "I used to play in college," he said. "Before football took over." He started to sing softly, almost shyly. The melody was rough but sincere. I found myself joining in, my voice barely above a whisper. When the song ended, he looked at me, eyes softened by candlelight and something harder to name. "You're easy to be around," he murmured. That I could have said the same, but my throat closed around the words. My phone buzzed on the table, Liam's name flashing on the screen. For a heartbeat, the world shrank to that glowing rectangle, to the unspoken truth hanging between us. I let it ring. Ryan noticed, though he said nothing. He just took another sip of wine and looked away, a faint smile tugging at his lips, not triumphant, but sad. Later, as I drove home through slick streets, guilt coiled inside me like static. The windshield wipers kept time with my heartbeat. I told myself I'd draw the line tomorrow, that tonight had been a momentary lapse, nothing more. But the lie felt heavier each time I repeated it. When I got home, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and studied my reflection. My face looked the same, but my eyes didn't. There was something restless there, something I didn't recognize. Liam sent a message before I went to bed, "Can't wait to see you this weekend. Dinner at our place?" Just us. That I typed of course and stared at the blinking cursor before hitting send. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ryan's expression, open, uncertain, human. The sound of rain replayed in my head, steady and endless. That I told myself I could still draw the line. That I hadn't done anything wrong yet, but deep down, I knew the truth. The line had already faded, and I wasn't sure I wanted to find it again. By the time spring arrived, Ryan was walking without the brace. The team called it a recovery, I called it an unraveling. What had started as obligation had become something else, something I couldn't define without flinching. Our sessions had grown shorter, but our conversations had grown longer. We talked about things that had nothing to do with soccer, fear, ambition, loneliness. The kind of things men like us weren't supposed to admit. It felt dangerous, being seen that clearly. When Liam visited one weekend, I realized how far I'd drifted. We went out to dinner, but I couldn't stop comparing everything he said to Ryan, his steadiness to Ryan's spontaneity, his kindness to Ryan's fire. Liam asked if I was distracted, and I lied easily. Just tired from training. He smiled, accepting it, and I hated myself for how relieved I felt. After he left, I texted Ryan, "Good session tomorrow." He replied instantly, always. The next day, he greeted me at the door in a loose t-shirt, hair still damp from a shower. The smell of soap and coffee filled the apartment. He looked lighter, stronger, yet there was something different in his eyes, something patient, like he was waiting for me to catch up. "You're almost ready to play again," I said as I unpacked the resistance bands. "Almost," he replied, watching me. "But not quite. Guess that means I still need you." I laughed softly, trying to ignore how those words landed. "I'll take that as gratitude. Take it however you want." The air between us shifted. The window was open, letting in the smell of rain-soaked pavement. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled like a warning. Halfway through the exercises, Ryan winced. I knelt beside him to check his knee, my hand steady out of habit. "Does this hurt?" I asked, pressing gently. He shook his head, but his gaze didn't move from mine. "Not there." For a moment, neither of us breathed. My fingers lingered too long, my pulse loud enough to fill the silence. I pulled back quickly, pretending to adjust the timer on my phone. "You're doing fine," I muttered. He leaned back, smirking faintly. "You always say that when you're trying not to feel something." I should have left then. That would have been the right thing to do. But right and easy had stopped meaning the same thing weeks ago. When the session ended, I packed my things slowly, delaying the inevitable. Ryan walked me to the door, limping slightly. His hand brushed mine, accidental, maybe. Or maybe not. "I didn't pull away, Ethan," he said quietly. "You don't have to keep pretending." I turned, every excuse dissolving before it reached my lips. "Pretending what?" "That this isn't real. That you don't feel it." The words landed like impact, sudden, irreversible. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My chest felt too small for my heart. He stepped closer. "I'm not asking you to explain," he said. "I just want honesty. For once." I should have told him he was wrong. That I loved Liam. That this was confusion, exhaustion, empathy turned sideways. But the truth rose like a tide I couldn't stop. "I do feel it," I admitted, the words barely above a whisper. Ryan exhaled, a sound halfway between relief and regret. "Then stop running from it." He didn't move first, I did. Maybe it was a reflex, or maybe it was surrender. Our foreheads touched before anything else, a hesitant gravity pulling us together. When we finally kissed, it wasn't reckless. It was quiet, slow, the kind of moment that feels more like confession than desire. There was no music, no speech, just the sound of rain against glass. His hand trembled when it found mine, and I felt something inside me fracture, not from pain, but from recognition. When it ended, I stepped back, breath unsteady. "This can't happen again," I said. He nodded, though we both knew it was a lie. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and guilt. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't answer Liam's call. My thoughts circled the same words again and again. "You crossed the line." That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone. Liam's name glowed on the screen, a reminder of the life I was still pretending to live. I typed a message, something ordinary, something safe, then deleted it before sending. For the first time in years, I didn't know who I was, and when I finally lay down, my body was still, but my mind kept replaying that moment, the softness of Ryan's voice, the look in his eyes when truth finally left mine. That I told myself I'd fix it tomorrow. That I'd make things right, but deep down, I knew I wouldn't. The morning after blurred into ordinary motions, yet nothing felt ordinary to Ethan. He moved through the cabin with deliberate calm, helping Ryan clear dishes, laughing at stories that rolled too easily from his friend's tongue. But beneath every word, beneath every breath, a secret pulsed between him and Mark, silent and undeniable. Mark behaved as though nothing had happened. His voice carried the same measured tone, his posture as steady as ever. He asked Ryan about his classes, about the next football practice, about things that belonged in the safe rhythm of father and son. To Ethan, however, every glance felt heavy, every word a reminder of the night they had crossed a line. When Ryan left to fetch more firewood, the silence between Ethan and Mark returned, unspoken yet thick. Mark busied himself with the coffee pot, pouring dark liquid into 2 mugs. He slid one toward Ethan without a word. Their fingers did not touch this time, but the absence of contact made the memory of it sharper. Ethan stared into the swirling steam, forcing his voice steady. Do you regret it? Mark's hand stilled on the counter. He did not look up immediately. When he finally did, his eyes were cautious, weighed down by something Ethan couldn't read fully. I don't regret feeling it, he said at last. But I regret what it means. Ethan swallowed. The words cut more deeply than silence would have. Because of Ryan. Because of everything, Mark corrected, his jaw tightening. This isn't a road either of us can walk without consequence. The conversation ended as Ryan returned, arms full of wood, breaking the fragile honesty. Ethan forced a smile, but his stomach coiled tight. He told himself he could bear it, that the memory of one night would fade with distance. Yet every shared glance across the room told him otherwise. The day unfolded in fragments. They hiked along the wet shoreline once the rain eased, Ryan bounding ahead with the energy of someone oblivious to shadows. Mark trailed behind, steady and quiet, and Ethan found himself caught in the middle, torn between loyalty and longing. At one point, Ryan climbed a fallen log, balancing precariously as he shouted some challenge back to Ethan. Ethan laughed, but his eyes shifted instinctively toward Mark, who watched his son with a fondness softened by fatigue. Their gazes met for only a second before Mark looked away, but in that instant Ethan felt the gravity of what they shared, something unspeakable, something that would not vanish. That night, the cabin was quieter. Ryan stayed up late on his phone, stretched out on his bed upstairs. Ethan sat alone in the living room, staring at the dim firelight, waiting without admitting to himself what he was waiting for. Mark appeared at the doorway, his presence filling the room even before he spoke. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed, expression unreadable. You should try to sleep, Mark said. I can't, Ethan admitted. For a long moment, neither moved. The unspoken promise of the previous night hung between them, dangerous and magnetic. Mark finally stepped closer, lowering his voice. This can't become a habit. You know that. Ethan nodded, though the ache in his chest deepened. But you still came. Mark's silence was answer enough. He sat across from Ethan, the distance deliberate this time. His eyes lingered, but his hand stayed firmly in his lap. I need you to understand, he said, his voice carrying both sternness and softness. What happened, it can't define you. Or me. It was a moment, not a path. Ethan nodded again, though the words only tangled further in his mind. He wanted to believe him, yet every glance, every pause, every heartbeat told him the storm wasn't over, it had only changed form. When Ryan's footsteps creaked above, both men fell silent. The moment dissolved into stillness, leaving only the fire to fill the space. Mark rose first, retreating toward the hall without another word. Ethan sat alone, the embers glowing faintly, his thoughts louder than the crackle of wood. He knew the weekend would end, the cabin would empty, and life would resume. But something had been carved into him, into them both, and though he didn't know where it would lead, he knew this wasn't an ending. It was only the beginning of a silence they would carry, one secret, two hearts, and a storm that refused to pass.